amazingly loud? But it's all about the frequency, isn't it? Be the frequency, as my good friend Brian over at Milky Way says, be the frequency you want to be. Well, that certainly will get you into a frequency. How you doing? Good to see everyone. Thank you for joining us here. You're looking beautiful. Your energy is vibrant. It's rising. And within this group, I mean, folks, you can't have a bad day. So thank you all for joining us. Let me just invoke favor upon the group. And, we always need favor in everything, and it manifests in our lives when we speak it into our lives. So may there be nothing missing, nothing broken found in your lives. Hello, everyone in the chat room. Nina the Mystic, Eric Green, how are you, my friend? Autumn, how are you? Sabrina, good to see you. Al, how are you? I saw David in here earlier. KT, good to see you. Emperor Rex, good to see you. Peace. Robert, how are you, my friend? And Lost in Space, I love it. How are you? Shirley, good to see you. Nina the Mystic, I think agape love always and forever. Absolutely. Can't go wrong in there. Joyce, good to see you, my dear. Rob, hello, my friend. Thank you for the wonderful comment. Hey, I appreciate that. And Robert, good to see you as well. And Debbie, man, whole lots of people. Dragon Soul Fox. I love it. Christopher Gallagher, how you doing? And Truth Seeker, 1961. What a year. Hello, Susie Q. How are you, my dear? So good to see you. There's a song about you. Apocalypse Now, probably one of the, well, there was a lot of good scenes in that movie, but yeah. Our generation, the baby boomers, we thought it was all about love. We talked about it all about love. The problem was it never became love. And it's a lesson as I was thinking today. You think about yourself in your generation. I mean, that's what's going to, how shall we say, signify your existence. It'll always be associated. I mean, you think about those who were in their prime, in the when the World War II ended, great celebration around the world, and things were marked by that. So anyway, little philosophy for y'all. Have a nice alternate reality is what this says. So everyone who's asking, happy birthday to those who are having one. And Trina will be on tomorrow. Always fun. Did you hear about the story about this? The Catholic school in Nashville banning Harry Potter books. And I quote, because they contain spells of both good and bad. Okay, well, there's admission there. But the big one was this. And it can show one how to conjure the dead. Did I miss something? I mean, I went back. If I did, I was extremely asleep. But yeah. What do you say to that? I mean, it's like, that's like having a Playboy and you never get the pictures. You read only the articles. Anyway, we move right on along. Yesterday, I'll tell you, folks, it was a phenomenal show, and the number and the unison of the comments and the emails. Thank you. We're going to finish up where we left off. We have to. Can't leave this hanging. It's like, no, there is a second part to this, and it's going to be very interesting. I want to share this. I sent this to my good friend Al, and I shared it with a few other people. So yesterday, I made some comments that the modern day Jesus did not exist until the mid 17th century, and got a lot of emails on that. People wanting to know, what are you talking about? This should help. The name Jesus, like Jehovah, has no meaning. Before the letter J was added to Jesus some 380 years ago, the name Jesus was rendered in the original 1611 King James Version of the Bible. Why'd they change it? This name is derived from Iusu, the Greek goddess of healing. Yes, I think some of you are connecting, what's going on here. Now, Jesus is also related to the Greek god Zeus. The Spanish language is derived from ancient Latin, hence why Spanish-speaking natives called them Latinos. Interestingly, the Spanish pronunciation of Jesus is Jesus. Jesus is not the English equivalent or translation of Yeshua. Jesus has no connections to Yeshua. None of the apostles ever taught in the name of Jesus or Jesus. Now, deal with that with what you want. You can do your own research, but this is how it so typifies what has happened to our species. We are a species that is, we are very susceptible to hypnosis, mass trances, spells, incantations, sigils, symbols. And folks, love me or hate me, it is just the facts. Now, ask yourself, what did the Spanish conquistadors, whose name did they march in? They didn't. They marched in their king or queen's name. Oddly enough, it is only the Americans that have ever marched in the name of Jesus in battle and here in the home soil, as they would say. Interesting facts. And folks, again, deal with it as you will. So, well, thank you, David. Thank you. There is an energy in here, folks. I mean, yeah. I feel like, it's like Garth Brooks, I got a couple 100,000 of my friends sitting in on this, it's like, hey, folks, all right, let's get on with it. So, yeah, history sucks, doesn't it? And it tells you as well, it shows you how we rely on things that are thousands of years old when we can't even get it right when it's a couple of 100 years old. And oh boy. So we hit on something yesterday that, well, I'm telling you, we're going to finish this up. And the reason why we are is that because in our society, our culture, hell plays a huge role. Hell is the foundation of much of our laws, punishment. You go against the law and you're going to pay for it. You got hell to pay. Have you ever heard that term? And by the example I just showed you, how the world has been indoctrinated to a name that absolutely has no meaning at all. But yet, it has great meaning because we, as a species, have made it so. And so the argument really becomes almost mute in one aspect, because in this case, as I heard one political candidate say, the facts really don't matter. And that's how we are. We would prefer to take a lie over the inconvenience of the facts. Cheers, everyone. So where did the modern concept of hell come from? How is it incorporated, particularly into the threads of Christianity and represented in other religions? But Christianity, they really do. They hold the top spot on this one. Well, it comes from where the religion came from, which is paganism. And we're going to see and learn here. So let's get right into it. The pagan hell described and dramatized by the poets was the grandest model of its kind. It was perpetuated by Christians who had their own bards. In comparing the two hells, one finds in both, except for names and variations in detail, numerous similarities. Both have physical fire as their element for torment because fire symbolizes the most atrocious means of suffering. You ever burned yourself? Yeah, we all know what that is. Um, but an odd thing, Christians exaggerated the pagan hell at several points. Although pagans had the bottomless barrel of the deities, the wheel of Axion, the stone of Cyprus, the images represented individual torments. Christians, on the other hand, held ready for everybody their boiling cauldrons, whose lids the angels lifted up in order to look in on the contortions of the damned. That's sick, buddy. It's worse. And God listens pitilessly to their wailings for all eternity. The pagans, in contrast, never described the gods of the Elysium fields as enjoying the sight of the damned in Tartarus. Like the pagans, Christians have their king of hell, Satan, with the difference, however, that Pluto was limited solely to governing the ghostly empire that he had received as his share. Although he himself was not evil in nature, he held in his kingdom those who had practiced evil, because that was his mission. Furthermore, he did not try to induce people to sin in order to exalt in their sufferings. Satan, on the other hand, recruits victims everywhere and thrills at tormenting them with a legion of demons armed with pitchforks used to turn them over in the fire. Anyone got some barbecue ribs? The nature of that fire, perpetually burning without ever consuming its victims. It has been a topic for serious discussion, and it has even been debated as to whether or not it might be a fire of bitumen. You know, that's the pitch they used to use in sailing vessels. Thus, pagan hell has nothing over on Christian hell. The same reasons that led the ancients to physically localize the kingdom of happiness also led them to circumscribe the place of torment. Having placed the former in the upper regions, it was natural to reserve for the latter the lower regions, that is, the center of the earth, to which they believed certain terrifying dark caverns served as the entrance. The center of the earth is also where Christians throughout time have placed the habitation of the damned. Let us draw another analogy regarding the matter. The hell of the pagans contained the Elysium fields on one side and Tartarus on the other. Olympus, the home of the gods, and divines human being, I think it's Denevins. Anyway, those that were made divine remained in the upper regions. According to the letter of the gospel, Jesus descended into hell, that is, to the lower places, to remove the souls of the righteous who had been awaiting his coming. Hell was therefore not solely a place of torment. Like pagan hell, it was simply a place in the lower regions. Like Olympus, the home of the angels and saints was in the higher realms. It was placed beyond the starry sky, which itself was believed to be limited. This mixture of Christian and pagan ideas is not surprising. Jesus could not destroy deeply rooted beliefs in a single blow, since people lacked the knowledge required to conceive of the infinity of space and the infinite number of worlds. To them, the earth was the center of the universe, and they knew nothing about its shape or internal structure. Everything was limited to their point of view, and thus notions about the future could not go beyond their understanding. Jesus, therefore, meeting with impossibility of initiating them into the true state of things, was not wanting to use his authority to sanction accepted prejudices, abstain from rectifying these concepts, leaving that mission to the passage of time. He limited himself to speaking in vague terms about the life of the blessed and the punishment reserved for the guilty, without ever referring in his teaching to the bodily punishment and torment which for Christians have compromised the article of faith. This is how pagan ideas of hell have continued up until our day. The spreading of modern knowledge and the overall development of human intelligence were needed in order to shed a correlating light on the matter. However, since nothing positive came forward to replace the entrenched ideas, the long period dominated by blind belief was followed by a transitional period of disbelief. The new revelation has come to put it to an end. It was necessary to demolish in order to rebuild, since it's easier to instill correct ideas in those who do not believe in anything, but who nevertheless perceive that something is missing, than to instill in them, in those who possessed a robust, thorough, absurd faith. Can't change it. I mean, if people believe in something, doesn't matter what you try to show them any different. That's why, quite frankly, to proselytize is just ridiculous. It's literally forcing your will on another free will. That isn't right. By localizing heaven and hell, Christian sects were led to believe that there were only two extreme situations for souls: perfect bliss or absolute suffering. Purgatory is only an intermediate and temporary position from which souls pass without transition to the abode of the righteous. There could be no other hypothesis given the belief in the definitive fate of the soul after death. If there are no more than two habitations, that of the elect and that of the damned, one cannot accept the idea that there are several degrees in which one, without accepting the possibility of ascending up through them and consequently progressing. Thus, if there is progress, there can be no definitive fate. Whereas if there is a definitive fate, there can be no progress. Jesus resolved the issue when he stated, "There are many dwelling places in my Father's house." Now, you have to understand that this was written in 1851. So, the Christian doctrination was something that was being fought then. And, whatever your opinion of the Christ is, I believe that there have been many Christs that have come to try to teach the different races of the earth the path. That's where it just seems to be leading to. All right, let's talk about limbo, purgatory. It is true that the church admits to a special position in certain cases. Children who die at a very young age without having committed any evil cannot be condemned to eternal fire. But since they have not done any good either, they are not entitled to supreme bliss. Thus, the church says they remain in limbo, that underdefined situation in which, although they do not suffer, neither do they enjoy blessedness. However, since their fate is irreversibly set, they are deprived of happiness for all eternity. Such privation, therefore, implies an eternal and unmerited punishment, even though it is not the result of anything they have done. Oh, man. I mean, talk about having the deck stacked against you. Cry. Okay. The same applies to primitives who, not having received the grace of baptism and the light of religion, sin out of ignorance by being driven by natural instincts. Of course, such individuals do not bear the same responsibility or receive the same merit as those who act with knowledge of what they do. Simple logic nevertheless rejects such a doctrine in the name of God's justice, which is fully depicted in these words of Christ: "To each according to his deeds. It's called self-responsibility. It's called being accountable to yourself. It's something that's not popular today, but anyway, it is. It is necessary to understand good and bad deeds as those that are done intentionally and freely, because only these entailed responsibility. Such cannot be the case with a child, a primitive, or anyone else who has not been enlightened. You know, I could say a lot of words, but I would say, isn't this slightly skewed? It's like, there's no other room for any other thoughts. And if you got any other thoughts, we already have you pegged. All right. So what is pagan hell? I mean, I bet most people don't know what pagan hell is. Did you even know that there was a pagan hell? Yes, there is. Remember, paganism, if you want to call it that, existed way before Christianity ever came on the scene. And, you know, you look in the annals of time, Christianity is a new kid on the block. And it's got competitors as well. All right. Knowledge about pagan hell has come to us almost exclusively through the narrative of the poets. Homer, Virgil have provided the most complete description, but we must take into account the poetic necessities imposed on such descriptions. Finland's description in his Telemachus originates from the same source as the ancient fundamental beliefs, but it has the more precise simplicity of the prose style. It describes the gloomy aspects of the various places and seeks to specifically emphasize the types of suffering to which the guilty are submitted. Finland extends such suffering to the fate of evil kings with a view to instructing his royal disciple. As popular as this work is, many persons may not be able to recall its description of hell, or they may not have reflected enough on it to make a comparison. Thus, we believe it would be useful to reproduce the sections that most directly bear on our subject. That is, those that refer specifically to individual punishment. And folks, isn't this what this is about? I mean, as you continue on your path of life, you begin to realize that there is a finite limit of time that you will be in this current life. And, you know, most of the people here are deep thinkers. They're reflectors. They know themselves. And it's good, because if we can get to that point here, when we get over into where and it's truly our home, we are sojourners over here. I say that all the time in my emails, and, you know, because that's what I have discovered. I truly am a sojourner here. This is not my native home. I know that. And it takes a while to begin to get, how shall we say, comfortable with that. All right, so let's get what pagan hell is. All right. So Telemachus enters and hears the wailings of the inconsolable shade. What is your disgrace, he asked. Who were you while on earth? And they replied, we were Nephophrasm. And that's the shade, that's hell. King of proud Babylon. Upon hearing my name, all the peoples of the east trembled with fear. I commanded that I be worshipped by the Babylonians in a temple of ivory, where I was represented by a statue of gold. The most precious incense from Ethiopia burned before it day and night. No one ever dared contradict me without being quickly punished. New pleasures were created every day to render my life more and more delightful. I was young and robust. Alas, so much opulence still remained for me to enjoy while on the throne. However, a certain woman whom I loved but who didn't love me, made it very clear to me that I was no god. She poisoned me, and now I am no more. My ashes were ceremoniously buried yesterday in a gold urn. People wept and pulled their hair. They friend throwing themselves on the flames of my pyre in order to die with me. And they will continue to come to weep together at the superb tomb of my ashes. But none will truly mourn for me. My memory terrorizes my family, while here below I am now suffering horrible torment. Yeah, his memory, folks. Shaken by this dramatic tale, Telemachus asked him, were you truly happy during your reign? Did you feel the sweet peace without which the heart stays oppressed and disheartened, even though it is in the midst of delight? No, the Babylonian responds, I don't even know what you're talking about. Sages praise that sort of peace as a soul good, but I myself never felt it. My heart was always being stirred up with new desires, fears, and hopes. I sought to benumb myself in the turbulence of my passions, employing ways to feed their turmoil in order to make them permanent and uninterrupted. The smallest pause to reason calmly would have been too much. That was the peace I enjoyed. Any other would have seemed like a fable, a dream. Such are the things I regret. Having spoken thus, the Babylonian weeps like a weakling who has been left deliberated by too much prosperity, and hence unable to bear disgrace with resignation. Now that's interesting, folks. Think about this. Too much prosperity. Yeah. At his side are some slaves who have been put to death in honor of his funeral. Mercury had delivered them to Shanron, Shanron, along with the king. They are endowed with absolute power over him, whom they had served while on earth. These slaves, shades, are not all afraid of nepotism, shade, which they hold enchained, inflicting it with the cruelest humiliations. One says to him, weren't we men like you? How could you have no insensitive to the point of forgetting your common origin with all men? Another insults him. You were right for not wanting to regard yourself as a mere man. You were a monster deprived of humanity. And another, so where are your flattering admirers now? You no longer have anything to give, you wretch. Now you can't even commit evil, and you have been reduced to being a slave to your slaves. The justice of the gods is slow in coming, but it does not fail. At these harsh statements, Nepervazon throws himself face down on the ground, pulling at his hair in an explosion of anger and desperation. But Shanron tells the slaves, pull him up by his chain, make him stand against his will. He must not console himself by being able to hide his shame. All the shades of the Sphinx must behold him, and they may recognize the justice of the gods, who for too long tolerated the reign of this impious man on earth. Soon thereafter, Telemachus perceives dark Tartarus nearby, emitting black, heavy smoke. Its noxious odor could cause death if it spread to the domain of the living. This smoke covers a river of fire, a vortex of flame, whose roar is like that of the mightiest torrents of water when they fall from the highest rock into the deep abyss. It is so loud that no one can hear anything in that dark place. Telemachus, secretly influenced by the Neva, fearlessly enters the precipice. First, he notices a large number of individuals who have lived in the most humble conditions. They are now being punished for having sought wealth through fraud, betrayal, and cruelty. He also notices many impious hypocrites who, pretending to love religion, had used it as a pretext to satisfy their ambitions, and deceived the credulous. These had these had abused even virtue itself, the greatest gift of the gods, and they are being punished as the most perverted of all human beings. Children who slew their parents, wives who stained their hands with the blood of their husbands, traitors who sold out their countries after violating all oaths. All of these are suffering less punishment than those hypocrites. The three infernal judges had ordered it to be so for this reason. Hypocrites are not content with being evil like other impious individuals, but want to be taken for good persons. Through their false virtue, they cause people to stop believing the truth. Having been mocked and despised by these individuals, the gods now take pleasure in doing everything within their power to avenge such insults. Next to the hypocrites, other individuals appear who loudly proclaim themselves absent of blame, but whom the gods persecute mercilessly. These are the ingrates, the liars, the flatterers, who worship vice, perverse critics who sought to tarnish the purest virtue. Finally, these are those who rashly judging matters without knowing the full story, thereby harm the reputations of innocent men. Wow. Want to know where? Now are y'all seeing the connection here? Knowledge, folks. And by the way, this is a poem. This is all this is. Just in case those who are tuning in late. Upon seeing the three judges seated and passing sentence on a certain man, Tamaliscus takes the chance to ask them what his crimes were. The condemned man immediately exclaims, I never did anything evil. I always took great pleasure in doing good. I was magnanimous, generous, just, and compassionate. What are you accusing me of? Then Manos says to him, no accusation is being made against you as far as men are concerned. However, did you not owe less to them than to the gods? What is this justice of which you boast? You did not fail in any of your duties regarding other men. You are who are nothing. You were certainly virtuous, but you attributed all of your virtue to yourself and not to the gods who had bestowed it upon you. Instead, you wanted to enjoy the fruits of your virtue as something of your own. You were your own God. However, the gods who made everything solely for themselves cannot renounce their rights. You forgot them. Thus, they forgot you. They handed you over to yourself, since you preferred to belong to yourself and not to them. Seek now, if you can, consolation within your own heart. Now and forever you shall be separated from those whom you wanted to please. You are left to yourself, your true idol. Know that there is no true virtue without respect and love for the gods, to whom everything is due. Your false virtue, which for so many years deceived the naive, shall be unmasked. Men only judge vice and virtue by what will either please or inconvenience them. They are blind as to both good and evil. Hence, a divine light tears down their artificial judgments after condemning what they admitted while justifying what they condemned. At these words, the philosopher, as though struck by lightning, can hardly contain himself. The satisfaction that he formerly had in contemplating his own moderation, courage, and generous inclinations are transformed into desperation. The sight of his own heart as an enemy of the gods becomes a torment to him. He sees himself as he really is and cannot escape it. He sees the vanity of judgment of the men whom he has sought to flatter in all his actions. His radical transformation is occurring within him as if all his innards are being overturned. He is no longer the same. He can no longer find support within his own heart. His consciousness, whose judgment used to be so favorable towards him, now turns against him, bitterly incriminating the folly and illusion of all his virtues, which from the beginning did not have the worship of divinity as their goal. He is confused and dismayed, filled with shame, regret, and desperation. The Furies do not have to torment him, for it is enough that he be handed over to himself, so that his own heart can sufficiently avenge the displeased gods. Oh man, yikes! Remember, this is just a poem, you know? But man, what a poem! And now you can see where hell is coming from. He searches for darkness in which to hide himself, but cannot find it. For a persistent light follows him everywhere. On all sides, its penetrating rays of truth avenge the truth he neglected to follow. Everything he formerly loved has become odious to him as the source of his unending ills. He murmurs to himself, "You fool, you knew neither the gods nor your fellow being, nor yourself. No, you never loved the true and sole good. All your steps were misguided. Your wisdom was only madness. Your virtue was no more than impious, blind pride. You were your own idol in the end." Tamalaxus next perceives some kings who had been condemned because they had abused their powers. On one side, an avenging fury shows them a mirror reflecting the monstrosity of their vices. They cannot help but see their gross vanity and their greed for foolhardy praise, their cruelty towards those whom they should have made happy, their insensitivity towards virtue, their fear of the truth, their predilection for cowards and flatterers, their lack of responsibility, their idleness, their indolence and unlimited distrust, their pomp and their excessive luxury at the expense and ruin of the people, of their ambition for vainglories at the cost of the blood of their subjects. Finally, their cruelty and each day seeking new pleasures in the tears and desperation for such misfortunate people. These kings see themselves in the mirrors incessantly. They see that they were monstrous and horrendous than the Shamria defeated by Bellerophon, the Hydra of Larina struck down by Hercules, or the Cerberus vomiting through the three mouths of a black and poisonous blood capable of contaminating all the races of mortals who lived upon the earth. You see, the Greek mythology. On the other side, at the same time, another fury insultingly repeats all the praises that flatterers had heaped upon the kings during their lives, while showing them another mirror in which they see how such flatterers really regarded them. The contradictions between the two pictures comprise a torment to their vanity. He notices that the worst among these kings are the ones who had received the most glittering praise during their lifetimes, because evil kings are more feared than good ones and shamelessly demand the lying adulations of the poets and orators of the day. In the depths of that darkness, where they only suffer insults and derision, they hear the agonizing groans of the suffering. Everything around them repels and confuses them and conflicts with them, a stark contrast to what they had believed about themselves during their lifetimes, deceiving others and convinced that everything had been made to serve them. In Tartarus, they were handed over to the caprice of a few slaves who now subject them in turn to the cruelest servitude. They serve these tormentors with no hope of even one day to soften their captivity. They remain subject to the blows of these slaves who have become their merciless tyrants, like an anvil under the hammers of the Cyclops. A Vulcan coerces them to work in the fiery forges of Mount Etna. There, Telemachus sees pale, hideous, disconsolidated specters. A dark sadness consumes these criminals. They are they're horrified of themselves, but are no more capable of freeing themselves from this horror than from their very own nature. They have no need of any other punishment for their wrongs than those very wrongs which they now see incessantly before them in all their fullness, in the form of terrible ghosts pursuing them. In trying to free themselves of the persecution, they search for a death more powerful than what had separated them from their bodies. In their desperation, they invoke a death capable of extinguishing their awareness altogether. They ask the abyss to swallow them up so that they might escape the avenging rays of truth that torment them. However, they are nonetheless condemned to the vengeance that drips down upon them drop by drop, never ceasing. The truth they hated to behold comprises their punishment. They see it standing against them now, wounding them, destroying them, tearing them from themselves like lightning, not destroying them outwardly, but penetrating their deepest minds. Among the beings that are making their hair stand on end, Telemachus sees several ancient kings of Lydia being punished for having preferred the pleasures of an inactive life instead of one of service. They should have worked for the relief of the people, a duty separable from royalty. These kings are reproving one another for their blindness. One says to the other who has been his son, "Didn't I often recommend my old age and therefore dying that you atone for the evils that occurred during my negligence?" "Ah, wretched father," says the son, "it was you who caused me ruin. It was your example that inspired me to ostentation, pride, luxuriousness, to cruelty towards others. Seeing you rule with such recklessness and surrounded by shameless flatterers, I grew accustomed to enjoying flattery and pleasure myself. I believe that other men are to kings what horses and other beasts of burden are to men. That is, animals that are only useful as long as they can provide service and convenience. I believe this, and it was you who led me to believe it. Now I'm suffering all these evils for having taken after you." To these reciprocal recriminations, they add the more eccentric blasphemies and seem ready to tear each other to pieces out of rage. Like nighttime birds of prey, around the kings hover the cruel suspicions, the hopeless fears, the distrust that avenges the cruelty they used to impose on their people, the insatiable hungry for wealth, the always tyrannical false glory, and their accused indolences, doubling all the ills they could possibly suffer and incapable of providing them any sure enjoyment. This is serious stuff, buddy. And I mean, it's just a poem. But all of you who have studied, you can see now how out of the what would be called the Renaissance era, out of the Dark Ages, where the modern day conception of hell resides. And you can see, what is it that the Christ said? It's easier for what is it? A rich man to enter through the eye of the needle than to enter into the kingdom of God, something like that. And it goes on to say that a number of these kings are being severely punished, not for the evils they had committed, but for having neglected doing the good they could and should have done. I wonder if every politician, every congressperson, every person who is there for the public trust, I wonder if we sent this to them and say, "How are you measuring up?" I wonder if things would change. I don't know. All the crimes of their people that resulted from negligence in observing the laws have been imputed to these kings. Whoa. Mr. Congressman, Mrs. Senator, you might want to listen. Who should have had ruled only to make sure these laws were obeyed under their reign? Also imputed to them is all the disorder resulting from pomp, luxury, and the other excesses that drive men to violence, inciting them to acquiring things by breaking the law. Those who are being treated most severely are the ones who, instead of being good and watchful shepherds of their people, only cared about devouring their flock like insatiable wolves. What saddens Telemachus the most, however, is seeing in that abyss of darkness the evil, a great number of kings who, although having passed upon the earth as very good rulers, have been condemned to the punishment of Tartarus for having allowed themselves to be guided by evil and hypocritical individuals. This punishment corresponds to the evils they have allowed to be committed in the name of their authority. Furthermore, most of these kings were neither good nor evil. That was their weakness. They never feared not knowing the truth and thus never experienced the pleasure of virtue and never felt the pleasure of practicing good. We went through that story. I mean, if you go back and listen to this, you can see. You can see where karma comes from. Justice that we don't even comprehend. Now, is this to scare the hell out of us? Hell doesn't exist, folks. But this is how hell came into existence. And I say that, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not. Here's my proof. Many NDEs, people that are of heavy religious indoctrination, they experience exactly what they believe. Thus, those who have believed in a hell find themselves either hovering over it or being subjected to it. And of course, when they come back and are revived, then they go forward and tell everyone it really exists. And that's how it works. All right, so this is an outline of Christian hell. And I might go over a little bit long on this, but stay with me, it's worth it. Theologians' idea of hell may be summed up in the following citations. This description is taken from sacred authors and the lives of the saints, and many be regarded as the best expression of the Orthodox faith on the matter because it is reproduced all the time and with few variations in sermons from evangelistic pulpits and the pastoral teachings. Demons are merely spirits, and the condemned who are now in hell may also be regarded merely as spirits. Since only the soul descends to that place, the bodily remains are given back to the earth to be transformed into grasses, plants, minerals, liquids, unconsciously undergoing the constant metamorphosis of matter. However, the condemned, like the saints, must come back to life on the final judgment day by assuming the same bodies in which they had been known during life. Now, obviously, there is no reincarnation here. There's no redemption here. There's no second chances here. This is infinity applied to the maximum. By assuming the same bodies in which they had known during life, never to leave them again. Wow. Okay. How does that happen? I don't know. What will characterize them is that the elect will return to life in purified, replenished bodies, whereas the condemned will take on stained bodies disfigured by sin. Thus, there will no longer be pure spirits in hell, but men like us. Consequently, hell is a physical, geographical, and material place, since it will be populated by terrestrial creatures who have feet, hands, mouths, tongues, teeth, ears, and eyes like ours, in addition to blood in their veins, and nerves that feel. We're talking corporeal bodies here. Okay, all right. This gets a little weird. Now remember, this is where hell is. This is the Christian doctrine. Where might this hell be? Some doctors of the church have located it within the very entrails of our globe. Others on some unknown planet. But the problem has never been resolved by any eschatological council. Hence, we are reduced to pure conjecture on that matter. The only thing we can confirm is that this hell, wherever it may be, is a world comprised of physical elements, but without any sun, stars, or moon, more sorrowful and inhospitable, more devoid of any sprout of life and any appearance of good than the most uninhabitable regions of this world of which we sin. The most prudent theologians do not dare describe the horrors of that abode in the way the Egyptians, the Hindus, and Greeks have. The last story we read was of the Greeks. But rather limit themselves to portraying it according to a few descriptions given in the scriptures, which depict it as a lake of fire and brimstone of the apocalypse, the worms of Isaiah, which feed forever on the dead bodies of the Tophet, the demons tormenting the men whom they managed to lead into perdition, the humans weeping and gnashing their teeth according to the expression of the evangelist. St. Augustine does not agree that these physical sufferings were merely reflections of mental suffering. He sees a real lake of sulfur with real worms and real serpents attacking all the parts of the body of the condemned and adding their bites to the fire. Drawing upon a verse in St. Mark, which was never written by any Mark, he claims that although these strange fire is as physical as ours and acts upon physical bodies, it nonetheless preserves them in the same way that salt preserves the bodies of victims. Well, they do believe in reincarnation then, just of a different kind. You see how this is all related, folks? They believe in the same thing. They're just in a different way. I mean, if you're going to be in perpetual torment of hell, your body is being consumed and burned, but yet you're going to be consistently reconstituted, I guess. The condemned will feel the torture of the fire that burns without destroying. It will penetrate their skin. It will permeate and saturate all part of the body parts, the marrow of their bones, the pupil of their eyes, the most recondite and sensitive fibers of their being. If they could immerse themselves in the crater of a volcano, it would seem like a cool and restful place. What kind of sick mind thinks of this? I mean, seriously. Anyway, we got to continue because, well, we want at least a certain different point of view that most have never heard. Thus speak the most timid, discreet, and modest theologians with complete confidence. They do not deny that there may be other bodily punishments in hell, but they say they lack sufficient knowledge to affirm it, at least as far as it concerns the awful punishment of fire and worms. You know, survivalists will tell you that worms, when fried over a fire, are very tasty. Just saying. However, there are more daring or more enlightened theologians who provide the most detailed, varied, and complete descriptions of hell. And even though they do not know where in space this hell is situated, there are saints who claim to have seen it. They do not go there with a lyre in their hands like Orpheus, or a sword like Ulysses, but were transported in spirit. Saint Teresa belongs to this group. According to this saint's report, there is a city in hell. At least she saw a sort of a long, narrow alley like those that are plentiful in old cities. And she walked down it, horrified, stepping on slimy, fitted ground covered with the monstrous reptiles. However, she was detained on her walk by a wall that crossed the alley. In this wall, there was a niche where she sheltered herself, without being able to explain how she did so. She said that the place was meant for her if during her life she abused the grace granted her by God in her cell at Avila. In spite of the extraordinary ease with which she entered this stone niche, she was unable to sit down, lie down, or stand up. Still less could she leave. Its horrifying walls began to close in upon her, surrounding her, pressing in upon her, as if under her own power. She felt like they were suffocating and strangling her, while at the same time filleting and chopping her into pieces. She felt herself burning and experienced every kind of anguish imaginable, all at the same time. With no hope of rescue, there was nothing but darkness surrounding her. And yet, across the darkness, she was amazed to perceive the hideous alley where she found herself, as well as its filthy surroundings, a spectacle as unbearable to her as the confines of her prison. This was undoubtedly no more than a tiny corner of hell. Other spirit wanderers have been more fortunate because they have seen great cities in hell resembling huge bazaars. Babylon, Nineveh, even Rome itself, with their palaces and temples on fire and their inhabitants in chains, dealers at their counters, priests with their courtesans in festive rooms, tied screaming in chairs from which they could not free themselves, and raising flames of goblets to their perched lips, servants on their knees in boiling sewers with arms outstretched to princes. From those hands flowed a lava stream of molten gold. Others have been seen unending plains of hell, tilted by starving farmers. These fields smolder with their sweat, and because the seed they sow is sterile, they harvest nothing and thus turn to devouring one another. Afterwards, as numerous as before, and still wraith-like starving, they leave in bands towards the horizon in futile search for a happier land, and their abandoned fields are immediately refilled by other wandering colonies of condemned souls. Still others report having seen hell as a place of a precipice, surrounded mountains, groaning forests, dry wells, fountains fed by tears, stream of blood, snowstorm in deserts of ice, or boats manned by desperate men sailing across unending oceans. In other words, they have seen everything that the pagans used to see, a dark reflection of earth, an immensely increased projection of their miseries, with its repressive natural sufferings eternalized, even dungeons, scaffolds, and instruments of torture forged by one's own hands. Are you seeing this? There are also demons who take on bodies in order to better torment men in their bodies. So wait a minute. So a demon who is guilty of far more, one would assume, than a man, yet is tormenting men. Wouldn't it be the other way around? I mean, you see, folks, this is what happens. This is, I'm just going to tell you, is a hypnotic trance. You start meditating on this crap, and I'm going to tell you what, because this is what it's done for literally thousands of years. And it torments our society. We see within humanity these very things. Yet we do not want to accept responsibility for our own actions. Some have bat wings, horns, scaly hides, hooves with claws and sharpened teeth, presenting themselves armed with swords, pitchfork, pincers, burning clippers, saws, grills, bludgeons, and bellows. Everything fiery hot, not fulfilling any other task for all eternity other than that of butchers and cooks of human flesh. Really? There's a whole freaking universe out there, folks, and this is what the best they got. But it's a hell of a controlling factor. People will live in mortal fear, even upon their deathbed, because this is what's been ingrained into them. Other demons transform into lions or huge vipers, haul their prey off to lonely caves. Some transform themselves into ravens to pluck out the eyes of certain guilty souls. Still others into flying dragons to carry their terrorized, screaming, and bloody victims on their backs across dark spaces to cast them into lakes of brimstone. There are clouds of locusts and gigantic scorpions, the sight of which produces nausea and chill, and the contact which causes convulsions. Multi-headed monsters with voracious gullets, wide and shake the manes of asp that adorn their deformed heads as they crunch the condemned with bloody mandibles, and then vomit them all out, chewed up but alive, for they are immortal. These demons in tangible form, who so graphically bring to mind the gods of Amenti and Tartarus, are well as the idols worshipped by the Phoenicians, the Moabites, and the other neighboring people of Judea. Do not act by chance, however, all have their function and objective. The evil they practice in hell is related to the evil they formerly inspired and instigated on earth. The condemned are punished in all their organs and senses because they offended God through their organs and senses. The transgressors of gluttony are punished by demons of gluttony, and the lazy by those of laziness, the fornicators by those of fornication, and so forth and so on. In this great a variety there are in sin. They feel cold while burning and hot while freezing. They desire rest and movement at the same time, when they will always be thirsty and starving. They will be 1,000 times wearier than the slaves at the end of the day, sicker than the dying, feeble, and more ulcerated than the martyrs forever. No demon refuses or will ever refuse to carry out its dreadful task. Why? What's its motivation? In this sense, all of them are well-disciplined and faithful in following the orders of vengeance they have received. Well, they're angels. If they're following God's orders, they're no different than Michael, Gabriel, all the rest of them. Perverted man, without this, what would hell become? Reprobates would rest if their tortures quarreled or became weary. However, there is neither rest nor quarreling among them. For no matter how evil or numerous they are, demons understand each other from one extreme of the abyss to the other. No one in earth's realms have ever seen an organization of such subjects more obedient to their princes, armies, more obedient to their commanders, or Masonic communities, more humbly submissive to their superiors. I'm not going to be able to finish this, as you can see, but which is a shame, because this is good stuff. I don't know how many people are still here, but this is deep. And I know it's not for the, those who are looking for, something to distract them. But for those of us who really want to see it, the point of all this and the point of this book that goes on, it vividly shows you folks, these are creations of man. No God of any kind that I would want to be associated with would ever do this. What you're saying is that this God is finite, that it can't take itself for its own self-responsibility. If you believe the story, all things are created by God. So then God would ultimately be the one who would be responsible for all of this. I mean, how would hell exist? On what grounds of justice would this be? What you're saying is that in one lifetime, you are to learn all the virtues given a creature such as an angel, just giving you an example, who's had an unlimited lifespan. And yet, if you think about the resurrection, what is that? Is that not a form of reincarnation? Well, no way. It's a different type of, it's a different type of, it's a different type of a thing, Yeah. Well, tomorrow I'll have, Trina, I think we'll probably have some good discussions on this. Folks, what I'm trying to show everyone here is that when you really study this out and you get past all the promenade, the covering, and really look at the foundation of this, folks, you can move on. There is a future life, and that future life is not in a place that can neither be defined nor located, heaven or hell. It just doesn't exist. And if you're saying it does, then what you're saying is that Earth, out of all the billions of possible planets, that Earth, us egotistical humans, that this is only reserved for us. You know why? I could see why ET would want to stay. You look at Earthlings and they're crazy. They're back crap crazy. And that's where we've been for thousands of years, chasing our tails in these never-ending belief systems. It's time we start waking up. There's an alternative view. Okay, I'll stop. I get riled up about this, because I see too many people tormented by this. I see so many minds that are locked. They can't. They're absolutely terrified to look anything beyond the veil. They'd rather look at the veil because that's safe. But we're not. Folks, we're going to move on. Each of us have a mission to do. You have a mission to do. You've been here before. You're going to have many lives yet to experience. There is no end. It never ends. And eventually, we all will reach that state of perfection. And we cannot even begin to fathom and imagine the other worlds, the other universes that we will yet to explore, that will yet be a part of. You, ma'am, you, sir, will play a critical role in the future, in another world, in another dimension. Your experiences that you have gained here are unique to yourself, that will be able to be shown and to taught to others. Your strength, your tenacity for life, your exploration of the spirit that says, I don't want to be confined. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Peace. Thank you for watching. And hey, let me know your comments. If you want to see the rest of it, we can easily put this in. It does get into some other interesting aspects. And what it does eventually, what we'll get to, is that it completely blows the door off the whole paradigm of hell and heaven. That both places are of such absurdity. One, you have no idea what you're going to do, become an automaton, I guess. And the other, where you already got the whole thing planned out. It's like, well, yeah, I'm going to live forever, but, and you go into this ridiculous mind coitus. All right, this has really gone long. I apologize. Peace to you all. Appreciate it. Love you all. You're good people to be around. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow then. All right, bye-bye.